Best of r/malicious compliance episode 97. Subscribe for edit videos daily. Alright, so this is one I just remembered. Apologies that it's not very dramatic. A few years ago I was working at a fabric store. One of my favorite places to be, but there was one manager that I didn't get on with. Not sure why, but this manager had some sort of problem with me. Since day one the main boss would put me somewhere in the store and this other one would come in, counter the big boss's orders and then spend the rest of the shift coming up to me and telling me to stock the candy every 5 minutes. And I do mean every 5 minutes. Ordinarily this takes about 3 minutes and it's just basic busy work to do between customers. Not this time. So it's the day of darkness in the retail world, more commonly known as Black Friday. Not only are we slammed, but we also have to upsell this new promotional item. We were literally getting marks against us if we didn't sell a certain number that day. The lines were long, and it was just one customer after another, with no lull between. By the end of the sales time every shelf was empty. Now I am by no means perfect, but I try to make sure I do all of what my job entails. Part of the cashier's job was keeping the front shelves stocked, and everything for that was behind the counter. There was nothing in the mythical back room, and even if there was, the Christmas stuff had started coming in, and for some reason this manager thought the best way to store it would be to put it in the direct middle of the hallway that was the back room, and effectively block all of the regular merchandise. There was about 2 feet of aisle to walk down one side of the room, but that's it. Not relevant, but annoying. So the other cashier and I had cleaned up everything, restocked the shelves, and there was nothing left up front but one box of Necco wafers and seasonal soaps. The candy was decimated, but there was nothing to put there. So we both chalked it up to a job well done, but we weren't allowed to leave the register that day. It had slowed down considerably and we both had about 2 hours of shift left. So we were just talking, attending to the few customers that still trickled through and generally attempting to wind down from the insanity. So of course this manager comes through and tells me specifically to stock candy. I try to explain that there isn't any backstock, and she waves me off and repeats to stock candy. I spend a few minutes double checking that there isn't more stock, but nope, it hasn't magically reproduced behind the counter. Okay, guess it's stocked. Apparently not, as the manager comes back a few minutes later and tells me to stock it again. My co-worker tries to explain and gets cut off with a, "Temp, you need to stock it. I want those shelves full. Don't stop until they are." Okay, sure. Full shelves. Now this has been months of her generally trying to get me to do most of the work in the store. This manager was having me do a lot of her own work. Double if she found out I was having a health issue, and I was tired of it. My doctor was already telling me I had to leave for my own health, so I wasn't feeling generous. Told my co-worker what I was going to do, and she backed me up. I stocked those shelves. These tiny little candy shelves were stocked full of anything I could find behind the counter. Those Necco wafers, soaps, various items from the promo shelves. I even fit a couple of steam irons on the top ones. Apologized to customers for the wait, because I couldn't stop until those shelves were full. The manager came up, red in the face and ready to start yelling, but I was saved by the fact that there were customers there at the time. I checked my watch, grinned, waved, and my co-worker and I walked to the back and clocked out. I never went back. Shopped there a few times since and that manager is gone. Edit, my first ever award. Thank you, kind internet stranger. Thank you. Next. I was working for a childcare center while I was in college. We staggered staff in and staggered them out so that we were always fully staffed when all the kids were there, and they all had various arrival and leaving times. So staff could be scheduled to arrive anytime between 7:30 AM and 2 PM. I worked MF 8:30-4:30. Even though my schedule was fairly permanent, I would check the schedule that got sent out every Sunday evening. It would always get sent between 6 and 9 PM and it would be for that current week, so we had less than 24 hours notice for our weekly schedule. A hot mess express if you ask me, but I'm not in charge and my schedule is set so I don't raise too much hell about it. One week I get the schedule and it says that my arrival time is 9 AM instead of my usual 8:30 for the entire week. I figure they're just trying to make minor cuts and they really like having everyone under the full-time threshold, so I just assumed they were barely cutting my hours so they could get away with it. No big deal. but I knew that most of the kids arrived at 9, so I would need more time to set up. I get there at 8:45 on Monday and set up quickly and go about my day. I do a little prep Monday night so I don't have as much to prep in the morning. So on Tuesday I get there at 8:55 clock in and begin my day. My week goes on like that with me prepping in the evening and getting there at 8:55 until Thursday when my boss calls me into the office and reprimands me for my tardiness. I tell her the schedule tells me that my arrival time is 9, so I'm actually arriving early every day. She says that the schedule says 9 just to indicate that you are the morning shift, but if you're scheduled for classroom time, you need to arrive at 8:30 regardless of what the schedule says so you have time to set up the classroom. I don't agree with this at all, and it's obviously not true because not everyone arrives at 8:30 anyway. There has to be more distinction than just morning crew versus afternoon crew on the schedule. But she admits that she's partially to blame for the mix-up and doesn't turn it into a formal write-up. I start arriving at 8:30 every morning, just like I had been before the week in question. I'm not a late person. One week I was going to be scheduled for the 6:30 shift because another co-worker needed to switch with me and we had both agreed to this. So the schedule comes out and says my arrival time is 1 p.m. I arrive at exactly 8:30, clock in, and sit my pretty butt in the office chair, and wait. Well, eventually my boss notices that I'm just hanging out in the office and asks what I'm doing. I say, well, I was told to arrive promptly at 8:30 no matter what the schedule says, so here I am. She says we don't need you here for the morning so you can clock out and come back when your shift begins. Nope. I say you can find a task for me to do until my shift at 1 starts or I can sit here, but I'm staying clocked in. You were the one that said that I have to be here at 8:30 no matter what. I'm just following your instructions. I had to deep clean the entire school until my shift actually started, but it was so worth it because I still got paid for the whole day and my boss had to admit to me that she was full of it. Watching her try to backtrack was the funniest thing that's ever happened to me. Thank you. Next. After graduating college, I worked for about 6 months as a cashier at a local branch of a chain sandwich shop. Mostly, it was a great job. Customers were mostly polite, my co-workers were friendly and helpful, and I genuinely believed in the company's products. Even my bosses were pretty great, except for one. We'll call him the jerk. The jerk was belligerent, vindictive, nitpicky, and pretty much an awful boss in every way a boss can be awful. He had the type of shitty no excuses policy that defined excuse as literally anything besides yes, sir, of course, sir. I could go on and on about all the different ways he was terrible, but this story is about one specific flavor of his awfulness. During our shifts, each employee had a certain section of the store they were assigned to keep clean in addition to their duties. The cashier section was the front counters and displays, and the coffee kiosk. I don't know if it was officially the manager's job, but as long as I worked there, whoever was the shift manager always took care of the outside patio area. Except for the jerk. At first, he would just say things to me like, I'm really busy right now, could you clean the patio? Which was fine. Part of the job description stated that if you had free time and the manager asked you to do something extra, you did it. He was well within his rights. But one day he suddenly started asking me why I was shirking my duties by not keeping the patio clean. After all, the patio was part of my section. It wasn't and never had been. I asked the other cashiers and they all agreed they'd never been told anything about the patio being part of the cashier section. I didn't mind helping out with the patio if my other cashier duties were done, but it irked me that he had taken something extra I was doing to be helpful and turned it into something that I was neglecting my duties if I didn't do. It felt like a bait and switch, and I felt cheated. The bigger problem, though, was that keeping the patio clean through my entire shift was a huge pain for me as a cashier. In the afternoons, I was often the only one at the counter, and customers would trickle in with a few minutes between each group. This meant that I was constantly having to run back and forth between the patio and the register, which confused customers and made it hard to get any actual work done on the patio. One day when this was particularly bad, the jerk came up front and started asking me why I hadn't cleaned the patio. I started to explain that I kept having to come back inside to serve customers, but he cut me off. I don't remember his exact words, but it was something along the lines of, "That's no excuse. Cleaning the patio is your job. Now go outside and do your job." Don't come back inside until the patio is clean. That last sentence was music to my ears. I assured him that of course I would do exactly as he said, went outside, and started cleaning. A few minutes later, a family walked past me through the front doors into the store. Through the large front window, I watched them stand, confused, in front of the register. There was no one at it to serve them. The jerk had gone back into his office to attend to his oh-so-important manager duties. I continued to clean the patio. A few minutes later, another family came in and joined the first, standing confused, and now annoyed, in front of the counter. At this point the jerk must have noticed them on the security camera, because he came out of his office and started ringing them up. Then came another set of customers, and another. The jerk was at the register, so he had to serve them. He was now being forced to cover my job, because I was too busy doing his. I finished cleaning the patio and came inside, and the jerk immediately tore into me, asking where I had been. Why wasn't I at the counter? Couldn't I see there were customers? I put on my most innocent smile. But you told me not to come back inside until I'd finished cleaning the patio. I assumed that meant you would take care of serving customers, since I couldn't possibly be two places at the same time. He just glared at me for the longest moment, then mumbled something about how I should have known what he meant and I was never to pull a stunt like that again, and shuffled back to his office. Not much of a victory in the grand scheme of things, but seeing the momentary flash of panic in his eyes as he realized his do as I say no excuses policy had backfired had me giddy for the rest of the day. Thank you. Next. So a little backstory: I work at FedEx as a package handler. It's the dreaded third shift, 9 AM. I'm one of the youngest workers in the building at 19. About 4 months into my job there we lost around 4 package handlers on my van line. Mostly due to the individuals getting better jobs or quitting. My van line I work on was according to numbers the most efficient in the building. We averaged about 3 misloads per week. That'd like amazing. The rest of the building averaged over 15. Then comes Abby. She is my age and a young Karen in the making. Abby got hired because her roommate was a trainer in the building. Abby would make this a point to everyone that talked to her. Well, Katie and I are best friends, so I already know how to do the job. I live with a trainer, so I already know the ropes. I don't need help. This is where the fun begins. Anakin. But anyways, it was a Monday and she was about 3 weeks into her employment and we processed the highest number of packages in the building we've ever done. We averaged 28,000 boxes a day. Today was 45,000. So we got into the day same as usually loading our trucks and Abby was put on my side of the van lines. She was getting slammed and I went over to help her load some packages and I say, hey, I'm gonna help you get some of these loaded so you don't get behind. Abby, I'll be fine, don't worry about it. Me. You have boxes pulled up everywhere, the rest of us are clean. Abby, it's not rocket science. Never touch my boxes again. I don't need your help. Okay, perfect. From now on I just need to focus on my work. The malicious compliance. Peak season was starting, so 40,000 boxes a day every day. Abby was put on my side of the belt for the rest of the season, so every day she would get slammed with packages and I would always be clean and help others load because it's not rocket science. Thank you. Next. So, this happened when I was in 4th grade. I tell this story often when asked about messed up stories, and my mom still tells it as well. I was a bit of a class clown. As such, the teacher, let's call her Miss Meanie, she was mean to me, because I was a handful, and she apparently didn't know how to handle hyper children. This was in the 90s, and one of my previous teachers told my mother I should be on Ritalin, to give you an idea of me as a kid. Anyway, I was always joking in class, and distracting others. I was able to do my work, but I admit I know looking back I was a handful. So the discipline of my school was to put the kids outside the classroom. It was a private school, from K-12, so you could go from kindergarten to 12th grade. When put out in the hall, we were on a hall sharing 4th 8th graders, and the adjacent hall, joined by a hallway with a dark storage room, was 9/12th. So I saw kids of all ages. Me being the sociable little monster I was, would make conversation with them, being friendly. They would always talk, especially the older kids. Older guys thought it was funny I was in trouble. I guess older girls thought it was endearing or funny. I don't know, but people always talked and even stood around to talk longer rather than passing by awkwardly. The teacher heard me, and scolded me many times. She eventually moved me to that joint hallway with the storage room in it. It was ceiling to walls with boxes, but she moved some out and put a desk in there. It didn't have but one functioning light, blocked slightly by the boxes, so it was dark, barely visible to write on my desk with. Once again, being sociable, I just stood in the hall and talked to passerby kids and older kids. Who was going to see me? It's at the end of the hall. No teachers came. Well, Mrs. Meanie caught wind and came back there to scold me. She gripped my arm, hard enough to leave a red handprint, and pulled me into the back room with gritted teeth. She leaned in an inch from my face and said with the very same gritted teeth, half yelling, "You are not to leave this chair after pushing me down into it. No matter what, no matter who you see, you are not to leave this chair again until I come and get you. You are to remain here and do your work, or we will be taking this to the principal and calling your parents." Me, scared at that thought, could not help it since my brain is slower moving than my mouth. What if there's a fire? Joking, of course. Through the same gritted teeth, even if there is a fire, you stay in this seat until I say so. So I did. Hours passed, and it's nearly lunchtime. I'm starving. I never ate breakfast as a kid, so I'm staring down the dimly lit clock time like it might suddenly start doing backflips. I hear the fire alarm go off. We have a drill twice a month, so I wasn't shocked. I started to get up, as I know I was supposed to no matter what, but then remembered Mrs. Meanie gritting her teeth at me. Better do what she says, I thought, smiling, thinking it will be funny to see her reaction, knowing it was only a drill. I saw the kids and teens all filing out. Remember how I said it was literally 8 grades worth of students? Picture 12 or so classrooms, each with up to 30 or 40 students and them walking down 2 narrow hallways, like a herd of chihuahuas through a coffee straw. So, orderly, even in a straight line, is not happening. I see them all taper out, and wonder where she is. I see them all gone, and now it's empty. Only the flashing light from the hallway alarm, and the ringing siren. I sit there thinking, oh man, when I see her face this is going to be amazing. Giddy with excitement at the thought of it. Then I smelled smoke. 2 fire drills a month. 4 9 months a year for my entire life it felt like. And this time I smell smoke. Then I see smoke. I'm upstairs, at the back of a dark hallway, in an empty 2-story, large school building. We had no windows in my school also, for some reason. Looking back, I'm sure this breaks some sort of fire code now. Okay, I might have messed up. I'm going to front. I started tearing up and getting watery-eyed, thinking I may have just committed suicide out of pettiness, when I hear stomping, loud and clear. She runs down the hallway, red-faced, teary-eyed, and out of breath, and grabs me, and for the first time, Mrs. Meanie is nice to me. She's hugging me and crying, rambling faster than I can keep up with. Thank God, thank God, thank God. Head count. Didn't see you. Panicked. Messed up so bad. So sorry. Please forgive me. As she's carrying me down the hall, I come out. All the kids are in the parking lot, and the fire trucks. Never saw those in action. Neat. They come out with several extinguishers. There was a small fire in the kitchen when making lunch. Thankfully, it was contained to a small area, did no real damage, only made a ton of smoke and was put out quickly by the firefighters. The principal wanted to know why I was there, and I told him truthfully I was told not to come out, even if there was a fire. This wasn't a jab at Mrs. Meanie. Our principal was cold as ice and made you tell the truth. At my school they actually paddled you with a wooden paddle with holes in it. Very old school type of punishment, even for the 90s. Irrelevant, but these horrors run deep. That thing whistled when swung and hurt. The principal had someone watch our class and I'm assuming gave her an earful in her office for the nearly rest of the day. My mother was called. They all convened in the office and once again, I'm assuming words were said. My mother was livid and said she paid too much money per month to have me locked in a closet. Even I was being a little shit. There is better ways to punish me, like say call her first thing and let her put the fear in me, which she did after this. I did not get off scot-free from her. As relieved as she was I wasn't dead. She knows all of this shit was my fault in the end, and my stupidity could have gotten me killed. Mrs. Meanie was a lot nicer to me then, a lot more patient, and I was less of a little shit. I still was a class clown, but within reason, and never tried to distract kids again. She was a lot nicer, and more understanding, and tried to reach kids rather than scream and scold at first glance. I had a lot of bad times at that school and left only a year later due to a particularly bad incident in which, once again, my mother was present. This time the teacher was fired for gross negligence that nearly hospitalized me. This time, I was not being a shit. Another story for another time though, not malicious compliance on my part in that one. Thank you. Next. During lunchtime, my class after eating would have nothing to do, so we played Uno to kill the time. Every teacher was okay with it, even the principal. One day all of us just minding our own business without making loud noises, then Mrs. Bitch, not real name sadly, come to our table and told us to keep our cards before she confiscated it. We kept it so our Uno didn't get confiscated. She added that if we wanna play Uno, we can only play outside school, and since we have nothing to do but waste our time, we should revise our studies. We weren't that bad for our exams, none of us failed anything. We obviously were mad that we couldn't do anything, so we just talked for the next 15 minutes plotting our malicious compliance, and the next day, we decided to play Uno outside school, like she told us to. Next to our school was this large field which no one used, separated with a gate with holes big enough for us to play Uno somehow, and we got a good game before Mrs. Bitch came. She was telling us off for playing Uno inside school, but we argued saying all cards were outside of the school, so technically we weren't playing in school. She obviously wasn't having any of it and wanted to confiscate it, but as stated above, all cards were outside and she tried to put her hands inside the gates and confiscate it, but she was fat and her hands could fit through, but her hands were now stuck. She tried pulling out but to no avail. She told us to help, so we helped her confiscate our Uno, and someone called another teacher and the rest of us watched her with the widest grin. We got 2 days detention. She wanted to give more, but our principal said 1 week was too much. Thanks principal, but she got a bruised hands for a week, so we counted this as a win. Now we play in toilets and we even have a table to put our cards on. It's like an illegal street Uno game. Thank you. Next. Edit. To Q. First time posting here and on mobile to boot. Sorry for any format errors or spelling. Some background info. I work for a large company in a factory setting. I essentially have 3 managers. My boss is the manager for product quality. The 2 above her run the whole factory, split between them. Me equals me. Boss equals my boss. Manager equals the only factory manager we have for now. This all starts about 2 weeks ago. We lost one of our managers because he got promoted, so now we only have manager to do the work of 2 people. The initial days were good. She was still learning from the supervisors below her on how to run the new half of the building. She had never dealt with anything when her partner was here. She liked to have a firm grasp of the processes and find ways to drive more productivity for less labor, not in the bad way. Usually. Cue the issue. She spent 2 days, half-hour work week, learning before she decided that she knew it all and could run everything from wherever she was in the building. This turned into blaming me and my team for the shortcomings of her associates. Just because the quality team has final say on a lot of things does not make us more powerful than her. She has the ability to ignore us and make her own calls. This ability is one she started to overuse and I nearly couldn't take it anymore. After 3 verbal conflicts between manager blaming me for things that I have zero control over, she goes to boss to have me reprimanded. Whatever rand or deflation of stress and anger manager gave to boss made no sense to her, so she came to get my side and put together a full picture. After reading my 2 weeks of notes about the manager disregarding the information I was trying to give her and talking down to me like I was a child, I'm 2 feet taller than her, I explained that it is not my place to contradict her, but it is my job to dive into problems and find solutions to give the manager. My boss agrees that I have been doing everything 100% correctly after examining both testimonies and all the open communications in out factory communication boards. After my boss tells manager that I'm genuinely trying to aid her judgment and find ways to solve her problems, she takes a deeper dive in the hating me department. Right after the talk from my boss, the manager calls me out over the factory radio 3 times within an hour about communication, everything I do to her 100% of the time. Cue malicious compliance. In the last 6 hours of my 12 hours shift I begin adding all information regarding my work and my employees' work to our group chat so everyone can have 100% visibility on what I'm doing and how she responds. Every 5-10 minutes for 3 hours I did this, post in the group chat, verbally call out over the radio with the same information, ask if she wanted me to do anything else. After the 3 mark she called me on the radio and said that's enough and freed me from the act of telling her everything I was doing. Manager has not spoken to me since. About to go in for day 2. Wish me luck. TLDR. Manager asked to be informed of my work. I flooded her inbox and radio with all available information for 3 hours until she got fed up and actively started ignoring me.